strike, and in particular to look at British capitalism and its alliance with the state in order to defeat workers in struggle, in particular the miners. So let's first of all look at what was happening to the economy and to British capitalism. In essence, what had been happening since the 1870s was the decline of what we call British staple industries: coal, cotton and engineering. These were the industries on which Britain's industrial wealth had been based, and coal was at the centre of this attack. How did employers manage to accomplish their decreasing profits in these industries which were in decline? Well, the miners provided an example, and in what was clear was that they were going to be the foremost example, and in a sense what all the employers were attempting to do in these industries was a version of an early version of fire and rehire. That is to say, it forced those workers to accept lower wages and longer hours, and that was one of the ways in which the capitalists could increase their profits. And so in 1921 the miners were locked out. The mines had been nationalised during the war. Now this changed, and the mines were decontrolled. The owners withdrew the existing contracts of employment. The miners wouldn't accept it, and those existing contracts of employment included savage wage cuts, and as a result of this, the British miners were simply fired. They were locked out. This wasn't a strike, it was a lockout. What did the movement do to support them? Well, in essence, although there had been some unity of purpose in the form of what was called the Triple Alliance, which had been formed actually in the wake of the Russian Revolution, that was an alliance of those of trade unions in those major industries under attack. When they were called to support the miners' lockout in 1921, they failed. This has been known as Black Friday. It was Friday when the Triple Alliance, led in the main of union leaders who were quite right wing, declined to show solidarity. The miners were abandoned by the labour movement, and it was termed Black Friday, and particularly by the movement and by the Daily Herald, which announced that this was the heaviest defeat that's befallen the labour movement within the memory of man. And so the aftermath was very, very clear. Emboldened by the defeat of the miners in 1921, the employers in the other industries, particularly engineering and cotton, launched a major offensive to enforce wage reductions on actually a whole range of workers: cotton operatives, builders, shipyard workers, seamen and others. So there was an engineers lockout in 1921, very similar to the miners lockout, and in 1922 the cotton workers. So this was an all-out offensive, and in order to explain why it was that miners were at the forefront of this, we just have to consider that this was the biggest industry. The mines employed over 1 million workers, and if the employers could succeed in their aims in smashing the miners, this would be a defeat of the biggest and best organised trade unions. It's redolent really of 1984 and the miners' strike, isn't it? So miners were at the forefront, and they still were in 1926 as well. So the result, the employers really used the state, and we can see the precursor to this during the 1920s, when the Emergency Powers Act was frequently invoked to ensure that the coal owners and other employers got their wishes. Troops sent to the coalfields, the recruitment of a voluntary defence corps began, and this again was a precursor to what the state did during the general strike. And the state was very well aware. Of what it needed to do. It supported the employers throughout. No neutrality. and they were aware, the state was aware, and this is an extract from a cabinet document, that the impending reduction in wages will invoke some kind of opposition. They regarded the miners as a test case for reduction in wages. And that was fairly clear that their strategy then had to be the state strategy to curb the opposition. And the opposition was there. The opposition, in particularly concerned the state and the employers, was the Communist Party, which had been formed in 1920. And again, this is a quote from the Cabinet Office, a report from on revolutionary organisations. The state was concerned that the communists were making inroads into the trade union movement, and in particular they noted the activities of a Moscow-inspired union, or the release from the Communist International, the activities of the Red International trade unions, and that was having an effect within the labour movement itself. Most of the labour leaders in the 1920s or early 1920s were fairly right-wing, and the role of the Communist Party, or the aim of the Communist Party, was to dislodge these right-wing leaders and to ensure that the left was represented. And as a result, organisations were formed. And if we look at the socialist opposition, which was absolutely key in this period, it consisted of the Communist Party, the Minority Movement, and an attempt to reinvigorate the Triple Alliance. It actually became the Quadruple Alliance, which had failed so dismally in 1921. And this meant the formation of the National Minority Movement, which was a left-wing alternative to the collusion, or they regarded the collusion and collaboration of the right-wing leadership. The National Minority Movement was established in 1924. Its president was Tom Mann, who was already a very famous engineering workers' union leader, a communist as well, and Harry Pollitt. Its aim was not to establish alternative trade unions, but to work within existing trade unions in order to dislodge the right-wing leadership. And they showed some success. There were minority movements which were established in many trade unions, including the Miners' Federation and the Transport Workers and Engineering Trades. They were very successful, the Miners' Minority Movement, because it resulted in the dislodging of Hodges, who was the leader during the betrayal of 1921, and the succession of A.J. Cook, who was a militant. And so when the next attack came, similar to 1921, when the employers, the miners, the mine owners wanted to once again impose savage wage cuts. This was in 1925. The result of this left-wing spurge was that the Triple Alliance actually then was galvanised into action, and they set a strike date for Friday the 11th of June in order to support the miners, who were once again going to be locked out unless they accepted lower wages. And the result of this was spectacular. The employers called it off. The government announced a temporary climb down and did what governments always do when they're back against the wall. They set up a royal commission. It was a stay of execution, and this was a victory. So we're calling this Red Friday, and Red Friday allowed the employers and the state time to prepare what they knew, with what they knew was going to be a forthcoming struggle. However, the Communist Party and the Minority Movement similarly regarded Red Friday as a truce not necessarily a victory. It was a victory in one sense. It was a stay of execution, and the Communist Party, through its paper, the Workers' Weekly, of which we've got the whole run in Marx Memorial Library, stated that the intention behind the truce was to prepare for a major attack, and that the workers must prepare for what they thought was going to be May the 1st, 1926, which was when the Samuel Commission was going to report. Every issue of the Workers' Weekly numbered off the days as they went by and said, what are we doing to prepare? What is the TUC doing? We have to prepare. The capitalist class was clear. The board and the Prime Minister stated that in the event of a united strike action on behalf of the unions, on the part of the unions, he would use all the powers of the state to defeat them. And that was very clear. And this is what this project from Marx Memorial Library will be doing now. We shall be looking at this temporary period of the truce leading up to the general strike, from July 1925 until May 1926, when the strike actually did take place, the 9 days of the general strike. And we'll be looking at the way in which the state prepared and the way the left wing was urging the official movement to prepare, and the rest is history. So you'll find that we will be marking all the events leading up to 1926 using our wonderful archive. This is part of the of our contribution to the centenary of the general strike, to analyse why it occurred, and why it was ultimately unsuccessful in defeating the employers' offensive. So watch out for more videos, and thank you for listening.